Hey all, your OS reviews. A while back we checked out the AceMagic/AceMagician AMR5 mini PC, which I really liked. It had a relatively performant AMD Ryzen 5/Ryzen 7 processor and a magnetic cap design, which made it easy to upgrade components, including the SSD as well as the DDR4 RAM. Furthermore, it has an interesting dial design which you can use to twist on to change between profiles, including silent for more energy efficient tasks, as well as a balance mode and also a high performance mode for gaming as well as video editing. So a cool hardware shell design combined with pretty good performance. Today we're taking a look at essentially the next generation upgraded model from AceMagic. This time it's called the AD08 and further upgrades to an even more powerful Intel Core i9-11900H processor. It's a octa-core chipset with 16 threads, clocked up to 4.9 GHz. Wi-Fi 6 is also built on board, so good connectivity as well. That being said, it is still using Intel's integrated graphics, so that is one thing to keep in mind as compared to having a dedicated graphics card, which if you are really a pro gamer, might be something to consider. Which, speaking of, AceMagic does have an even higher end mini PC as well with a graphics card, which is called the 𝐂𝐥𝐥 It's a cube-shaped design, so even larger in volume, but makes room for the graphics card inside. This is technically their flagship model at the moment, so combining a high-end GPU plus a high-end CPU with an i7 or i9, versus again, this model has a high-end CPU, but the GPU is still relatively average for a mini PC, that is. That being said, this is going to be a more cost-effective model as a result, and slightly more compact, not to mention that it should be more than sufficient for the vast majority of folks out there unless you are a true competitive gamer. Even so, for light gaming, this thing should already be good enough, and especially for office-related tasks that many PCs are designed for, this thing will still fly with its, again, i9 processor. 16 gigs of RAM are built on in by default with the 512GB SSD for storage out of the box, and just like before, you still have a dial or knob for easily going through 3 different modes, including a silent one, which is energy efficient, taking about 20 to 30 watts. Another one here called auto is more of the balance mode, versus the high performance mode kind of cranks the CPU onto the maximum clock speed. So inside of the packaging here, we have, of course, the mini PC itself. There's a quick user guide, and then underneath this box, we have a AC power adapter. So it comes in 2 different pieces. Uses a round barrel plug for power, and also it's relatively slim as well for the adapter. So you can probably slide this into a backpack without too many problems, and then just attach the other end into the wall. Otherwise, we have also a bundled HDMI full-size cable that you can use to plug it into a monitor. And a closer look at the mini PC shell, we have a Mighty logo etched onto the front plate, which is constructed out of polycarbonate plastic, just like on the last generation model. Plenty of ventilation grills for air to flow through, and then that dial, which is super shiny and chrome-like, is constructed out of aluminum, just like on last generation model, with the 3 dials for going through the profile settings very easily. You can press inwards to turn it on, and there is an LED ring that will glow, changing different colors depending on the mode that is in. The other side also features a logo that says "Enjoy Power, Enjoy Life," with additional LED accents running onto the very top this time around as well. Now, this is another magnetic door that you can pop open just like the last generation model, continues with that honeycomb pattern, and most importantly, this makes it easy for you to upgrade, again, components, including RAM as well as SSD, storage space, including even a M2 slot over here as well. So very expandable in terms of storage, which is good, and lots of I/O too. On the very back here, there are 2 USB Type-A 3.0 ports. There's also 2 full-size HDMI ports, again supporting up to 4K output, Ethernet port if you don't want to use Wi-Fi, as well as the power adapter port, and also a 𝐂𝐥𝐿 lock. And then on the other side, we have additional 2 more Type-A USB 3.0 ports, 3.5mm aux port for microphone and also sound if you want to connect headphones, and there is a Type-C port as well that can be used for both display monitors as well as additional USB peripherals. Some soft touch rubber feet on the very bottom here to prevent it from sliding around onto a surface or a desk. Here's also just a quick size comparison with the aforementioned last gen AMR5, which you can tell here is going to be just a little bit more compact, and also the build quality being very similar. Here's what it looks like on the very back. I would say one difference this time around is we have, again, a full-size HDMI instead of a display port on the last generation model, which was a little bit more non-standard, I guess, compared to regular HDMI. But aside from that, everything else remains actually very similar here side by side. And now turning the mini PC on, this is what it looks like with the RGB accent lights underneath, so it does really make it quite vibrant and eye-catching onto a desk. Auto mode, it will turn green, as well as the performance mode, it will turn red. As you can tell there, the fan will also kick up a little bit more. The very top here also flashes with those RGB colors. And what happens if we pull open the lid here for the caddy, you can tell the LED strips are technically just underneath these two compartments, and it is diffused, so it looks still quite even as well. And when the computer is in standby mode, it will also slowly strobe through single RGB colors, as you can tell. So some of the animations here up top can also change accordingly. And the mini PC is running on Windows 11 Pro out of the box, which is relatively clean aside from the Microsoft Windows apps. We have just a RGB LED control software app, allows you to turn on or off the lights there on the top of the mini PC, as well as go through the rainbow gradient effect or the breathing, as well as a single light mode that we saw there from earlier on. And in terms of the built-in 512GB SSD, by default, after the Windows OS is installed, you have roughly 428GB free for you to install your other programs and media files. The i9-11900H, again, scores a little bit north of 20,600 on Passmark, which is actually quite impressive. In fact, this is actually a little bit more performant, at least from a CPU perspective, as compared to the octa-core M1 as well as base M2 chips from Apple. Those two silicon scores a little bit north of 14,000 as well as 15,000 by comparison, but at the same time it's not quite as powerful as the Apple M1 Max, which is a 10-core processor instead of the octa-core one found here in the i9-11900H. This is actually relatively close, as we can tell here, to the AMD Ryzen 7 5800H, at least from a CPU-only perspective. For reference, the Intel N95 is another popular chip that we've been seeing on mini PCs as well as laptops lately, and this one is a quad-core chip by comparison, more of a mid-range / entry-level processor, but it scores a little bit north of 5,000, which is already an improvement compared to similarly classed Celeron chips of yesteryear, including the N3450 as well as the 3350 were very popular choices just a while back, and those by comparison only scores around 1,000 to 2,000 on Passmark, which was still sufficient for the basics. But obviously, by contrast, the i9 here is a pretty big leap. Even when compared to the N95 chip, it's about 4 times more performant. When it comes to web browsing, pages load back almost instantly, even on more complex sites like The Verge here with lots of different ads and video elements, still doing a pretty good job, as you can tell. And that's also thanked by the relatively good reception quality of the Wi-Fi 6 dual band chip on board, getting almost full bars in fact. Same thing goes with Bluetooth 5.0, so when it comes to connecting to the internet, never got any disconnections. Again, the 16 gigs of RAM on board is also more than sufficient for handling even more complex sites. I was able to juggle more than a dozen tabs in the Chrome as well as Edge browsers, and still everything was retained in the system memory as I jumped back and forth. It was a very fluid process for things like research as well as just browsing the web, reading back articles in general, especially when it comes to some of the heavier transition effects built into Windows 11, including going into different desktop modes as well as various side panels. All of these are almost instantaneous as you're clicking on these elements and interacting with the UI, whereas on less performant chips, sometimes it would hang for a split second, but that's definitely not the case here. In fact, even a cold boot when turning off the computer and then booting up the PC again only takes around 2 seconds to turn on, and you're into the UI, everything is up and running. So very impressive there in terms of the speed. And even in the high performance mode, the fan isn't kicking on 24/7. It's smart enough to only use it when needed. Yes, this will technically allow it to run the fastest in terms of CPU, and you hear it a little bit more often if you're doing heavier programs like video editing, as well as doing a bit of gaming here and there. That being said, it still isn't bad, just a bit of white noise in the background compared to the balanced and energy saving modes where it's going to be a lot more silent. And now a quick demo of streaming back some media on YouTube or Netflix, and we can also crank up the stats for nerds, bring that up, as well as start off in the full HD resolution. You can tell that there are no drop frames, everything loads back really quickly, and even scrubbing between parts of the video are handled quite fast as well, thanks to the good antenna reception of the Wi-Fi chip. So we can also crank this up now to 4K res and see that it should still be a fairly fluid process, just a split-second delay there at the start, but afterwards things are still going to be running along here really without any problems at all. In fact, we're still getting virtually no drop frames, maybe the occasional one or two, but you can't really perceive it with your eyes. In general, I would say streaming back, again, 4K clips is not going to be an issue for this mini PC to handle. Great for entertainment purposes. Again, even in 4K, no problems here at all. When it comes to office-related tasks, such as Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, as well as Word documents, you also really won't find any problems here, even on more complicated templates, as well as different transition effects, even larger spreadsheets with tons of rows and columns, as well as different formulas inside, can all be handled. What I do have to flag, though, is it has recently come to light that certain mini PCs and Android TV boxes perhaps have a bit of malware pre-installed in certain cases that isn't quite as secure. So to AceMagic's credit, they have come out with a fairly public statement addressing this that can be found on their website, and they have mentioned that some limited batches of their older mini PCs seem to have maybe an unlicensed version of Windows installed due to a vendor that they were working with that they have since addressed and moved on to a more credible vendor for products being sold here in 2024 moving onwards. It should be perfectly fine out of the box. Your Windows version should be already fully licensed and free from any bloat or any extra applications. But if you happen to be affected with past models, or if you're still feeling a little bit insecure, you can still reinstall the Windows OS, and they provided some steps here as well, and afterwards you will still have a fully licensed version of Windows which is tied to the actual computer that you are installing it on. So it's not like that license will be revoked, but this will give you a fresh installation if you need to access it, almost like a recovery disk of sorts. So good that this is available for accessing. Now when it comes to applications, of course, since this is running on a desktop version of Windows, you're able to run any x86 app, any legacy program, drivers, and there are thousands upon thousands of those available for different peripherals you might be connecting to the computer. And that is, of course, one of the benefits of this desktop operating system compared to, say, alternatives like Chrome OS, or in some cases Linux, which may have a little bit less community support. Of course, you can still run more optimized mobile apps using the Microsoft Store here for things like social media programs, but of course you're not limited to only the ones that are showing up here. So very good in terms of application support. Anything you really want to throw at this machine, it'll be able to handle. And similarly, if you're doing productivity tasks, including photo editing in Photoshop, as well as even video editing in 4K, this is a computer that can handle it, which is not always the case with these mini PCs. So in my personal experience, editing about a 5-minute 4K clip took around 2 to 3 minutes to export, so relatively quick, and during the entire process it was still quite responsive in terms of previewing, dragging around the timeline. Photoshop, with even dozens of layers, still felt pretty responsive as well. You're scrubbing along a timeline, and you can tell that things are still going to be fully usable for some of these tasks that, again, other mini PCs we've seen in the past may have struggled with. It will get you by when it comes to casual titles, especially with emulation. When you're looking at those games, it still runs back fairly smoothly, not a lot of drop frames either, very much playable as expected. That being said, if you're looking at more modern AAA style games, then arguably if you try cloud gaming solutions like Xbox's xCloud, as well as the Amazon Luna service that can provide even better hardware, and as long as you have a reliable enough internet connection, you can play back titles including Cyberpunk at a faster frame rate as well. So point being, if you are a competitive gamer and you want the fastest frame rates 24/7, even on the latest games with the highest graphics, then cloud gaming will still probably be your best choice. But if you are looking at slightly older titles, as well as ones like Minecraft, for example, or Fortnite, that aren't necessarily the most demanding graphics-wise, it will still play back on here really without any problems at all. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the AceMagic AD08, and I have to say there are plenty of things to like here, including a, again, very good hardware shell with the performance dial knob that you can easily switch between different profiles, quite convenient. Magnetic cover makes it easy to upgrade components inside, as well as, again, fairly robust performance for a mini PC of its class. So thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. You can learn more details if interested, but for now, that's been the AceMagic AD08 hands-on review here at OS Reviews.